How you doing? This is Josh. This is one of those topics that I feel like we get a lot of questions about as teachers, and I know I only have 2 examples, but I'm going to do my best to use these 2 examples to explain it. But if you're still not getting it, send me an email, get in contact. Let's do some more of these so that you really start to get it. I'm going to go slow through these. Sorry, I know, but it's a lesson, right? And I want you guys to really understand this because there's some good stuff in here, okay? Least common multiples. It's a lot different than whole GCF, greatest common factor, and least common denominator. There's all those things. There's just so many different, acronyms out there. This one just gets a little bit tricky at times. So let me just start off by writing up my 2 numbers to start with and then going through them. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do my prime factorization of both numbers. What makes a 12? 2 and 6. What makes a 6? A 2 and a 3. Okay, so I have a 2 and a 2 and a 3. What makes a 40? A 2 and a 20. What makes a 20? A 2 and a 10. What makes a 10? A 2 and a 5. So I have 2 times 2 times 2 times 5. Okay? Now this is where things get a little bit tricky, okay? In order to find the least common multiple, you need to use the greatest power of each factor, okay? You need to use the greatest power of each factor. And the way you figure that out is to go back and condense these back into using exponents to figure out which one has the greatest power. This one is 2 times 2, which we can write as 2 squared, right? Because the exponent tells us how many of them there are, and then we just would multiply them out, times 3. And this guy would be 2 to the 3rd, right? Because there's 3 2's, so it's 2 times 2 times 2 times 5, okay? Now you need to figure out what is the greatest power of each factor, okay? Well, which of the 2's here, which one has the greatest amount of exponents? This guy. What about the number 3? Which one has the greatest number? Well, this guy does because there's just one of them. And then which one has the greatest number of 5's? This guy over here, okay? And so depending on how your teacher wants you to write it, they're probably going to want you to start with the lowest valued, base unit. So you would write it as 2 to the 3rd times 3 times 5, okay? And that would give you your least common multiple, okay? I know that part's tricky. The key parts are once you factor both of these, put the values that you can back into exponent format, because then it makes it easier to be able to tell which one has more of them, and that's the guy you use. If this had been what if this was like a 3 to the 5th and a 3 to the 6th? Well, which one is bigger? This guy, right? So you would have moved this guy down as well, the 3 to the 6th, because you want the greatest power of each of the factors. Okay, that's the key part. The greatest one with the most the greatest power, the greatest exponent of every single factor that you have. And by factors, we mean every single number that you came up with in this row. Even if there's just one of them, that's okay. You still have to drop it to the next level. Okay, I know that part's a little bit tricky. Let me do the next one here. And like I said, if you don't feel like this is enough, then just let me know. Get in contact and we'll do this again with maybe some more problems. 6a squared and 18a to the 3rd. All right, let me do my number here. What makes a 6? 2 and a 3. What makes an 18? A 2 and a 9, which is a 3 and a 3. So I have 2 times 3 times a squared, and I have a 2 times a 3 times a 3 times a to the 3rd. All right. After I've done my factors, that next step was to do what? Right. I know my finger's right in front of it. But the next thing you need to do is you need to condense anything that you can into exponent format. So this 3 times 3 here needs to become a 3 squared. Okay? And the reason you do that with all of these that are in here is because you're trying to find the greatest power of each factor. And so if you don't make these into exponents, it makes it a little bit tricky sometimes trying to figure out, well, which one is the greatest power? Okay? Let's see here. How about 2's? Well, I have a 2 and a 2. There's just one of them. So 2 is going to go into there. And out of the 3's, which one has the greatest amount or the greatest power? This guy. So it's going to be times 3 squared. And then what about between the a's? We have a squared and a to the 3rd. Well, it's going to be this guy because it's the greatest. Again, I'm saying this a lot of times, but I really want it to sink in. It's the greatest power of each factor. So you go factor by factor by factor, and whichever one has the biggest amount of them, that's the guy that makes it to the final answer down here. Okay? So I hope that kind of helps with this whole, least common multiple thing. I know it can get a little bit tricky, but that's the basics of it. Get in touch if you're not sure, want to do a couple extra problems. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Subscribe to my videos. Check out the other things. Let's do this math work together. Thanks for watching.